Hey everybody, this is Townsend. Thank you so much for tuning in. The goal of this podcast is to cover a vast variety of topics regarding mental health, struggles, share people's stories, and hopefully remind you that you're not alone. I hope you enjoy. What is up?
What up? How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good.
How you feeling?
Pretty sore, but managing as far as I can go, without like the uber strong pain meds. So
Yeah, very good. So you're not gonna be like doing bench presses for us tonight, huh?
oh, absolutely not.
I'm really looking forward to it. You would probably do way more than me. I saw that you played like college basketball. Is that right?
Yep, sure did. Back in college. Yep, small Division One school in South Carolina.
That is really impressive. I'm very impressed. I'm going to need you to come down to Arkansas, teach me how to play, show me some hoops, some moves.
It's been a little while since I picked up a ball, but I'm pretty sure it's like riding a bike. You just don't forget.
Yeah. I wish I could say the same, but I've grown like a foot since I last played, so I'd probably trip over myself. It would not be. Would not be pretty.
I've changed genders since the last time I've changed, so I think I'd be right there in the same boat as you.
You might trip over your own feet too. I'm not gonna. Instead of like brushing your hair out of the way, you'll be like, "What? Wait, I don't have hair anymore.
There's nothing there.
There's no ponytail. What the?" I recently cut off. It looks really shabby right now, but I recently cut all my hair off, and I still find myself like trying to get my hair out of my shirt, and it's not there. It's like,
well, I recently shaved mine off, and so I go from like. At first, I was still using barely any shampoo, but now it's like nothing because there's nothing up there.
I'm surprised you even use shampoo. It'd be like soap. Just a little scrub.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like pretty much a scalp scrub at this point.
I love it. That is awesome. All right, guys. So let's get you introduced. My name is Townsend. This is Aiden. I ran across your name through a company called Only Human, which I'm a huge fan of. They actually kind of had the same goals, I guess, as I do. And so we hit it off immediately. I got close to Bree Pear, who's the owner of that. She actually did a live stream with me a month or so ago. It was amazing. But anyway, so their view of life is just that to spread hope and love for everybody. And my view and my platform I want to use to let people feel less alone. So no matter what you're going through, for everybody to feel like you're not alone. And so I met Aiden through that. I've been following him for a long time and just like so blown away at his transparency. Like, I think that's so cool that you have the guts to get on, share your journey, and like the haters, you just get on there and tell them what's up. And I love that. I think I just can't imagine him being so transparent. You've got like several million followers on TikTok, so I can't imagine the terrible things you hear, but we are here to let you know that you're loved. I'm so excited that you're taking time to chat with me, because this is an area I actually reached out to several people from the Only Human to talk about transgender in that community, because it's something I am not transgender myself, and I want to educate myself and learn more about it, because I do want to show love and just be accepting as best that I can. And so that's why I wanted to have you on here today. That was a really long introduction, but thank you so much for joining me. All right, I have to know, how old are you?
I'm 27.
Okay. Not too young. Okay. Okay. I'm totally kidding. I'm not kidding, but I'm totally kidding. So let's get started off. We'll go deep. So this is an area that people literally know nothing about. So we're going to start off kind of simple. What is transgender? Like, how would you define that for people?
So to me, transgender is someone who does not feel that they belong in the body or belong with the sex that they were assigned at birth. They just kind of feel not themselves practically their whole life. And me personally kind of felt that way as long as I can remember, but have always known, just never had the correct terminology. So it's just somebody who's just not comfortable in their own body. It's not their body. Their outside does not match their inside, and they do not identify with the assigned sex at birth.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's fantastic. All right, so I want to talk about, if it's okay with you, your coming out story. So some people talk about how the transgender community is actually having to come out twice, which I cannot imagine the first one being so terrifying. So basically, for people that don't haven't heard that. So they say you have to come out first, some, and say, I'm gay. And then you have to come out, or whatever, bi, whatever you want to be. And then you come out again saying, I'm also transgender. So it's like two huge events and coming out stories. So tell us a little bit about yours. Did it fall in like that? Did it happen at once? Like,
So no, I came out as a lesbian probably my senior year of high school, practically right before I went off to college, which was also very terrifying, and kind of took my parents a little while to come around to the idea. But I mean, I think it kind of helped that like I did leave. It gave them some space to think about it, and came around eventually, and were super supportive. And then yes, when I was 24, and the crazy thing is I actually didn't know about the transgender community until I was 23 years old. I'd always felt, like I said, I've always felt this way, and that I didn't belong in the right body, and there was something different about me, but I didn't have the correct terminology, or I thought I was just like a super masculine lesbian. Like I just like, oh, this is how we all feel. Like this is how we're supposed to feel. And it wasn't the case until I met somebody who was transgender when I was 23 years old, and talked to him. And pretty much, I mean, just one conversation, he was like, and so practically from there, I came out to my sister first because she's always been like super supportive, and then kind of from there tried to figure out, just talk to her about the whole process, and like possible name options and what was going to happen, what I was going to have to go through, and then kind of talk to her about how she thought that the best way to come out to my parents would be. Unfortunately, at the time, I was living in Tennessee and my parents were in Florida, so I couldn't really have that sit down conversation with them face to face or anything like that. And so we decided the best way to do it would be to write kind of just a long, detailed email, just explaining how I've always felt, why I'm doing this, kind of the process itself, what it means to be transgender, and kind of just trying to answer any questions that I would think they would possibly have without them asking questions. And so I wrote the email, and then she proofread it, and she was like, well, I would word this differently, or I would add this information, or I would say this question differently. And then sent the email with the subject that was just like, please read this together, to my parents. And then I think I sent it at like 8 p.m. Yeah. Oh, heart dropped into my stomach, like completely. I think I sent it like 8 p.m. And then I got a text message from my mom at like 10 p.m. And it was just like, we love you no matter what. And so it took them a while to understand, but I don't think it wasn't so much that they weren't supportive. I just don't think they understood.
Sure.
And I think the more information I got, and the more I transitioned and seemed happier and seemed more myself and everything, I think they came around like, okay, like this is what I really needed. And then I think it was when I was getting my second top surgery procedure, we were in the car, and my mom looked at me and she was like, you know, you make a really handsome man. Like maybe you were meant to be a guy. And then I think I was just like,
I think I'd be like, oh God, thank you. That is awesome. I love it. Man, having supportive parents, or just a supportive tribe behind you, even if like, you know, Only Human talks about choosing your family, just having that tribe that supports you. Oh man, that means so much.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I love it. All right. So another thing that you and I had actually discussed before, and you made the good point of we need to discuss it before I asked a question about it. What is a dead name? So you talked about just a minute ago, you and your sister trying to pick a new name for you. Kind of explain how that works.
So most, not all, because some trans individuals do keep their dead name, but a dead name is the name that you were given at birth. More often than not, trans individuals do not like to talk about their dead name. It is very disrespectful to ask somebody their dead name, or their old name, or their given name. Because unfortunately, a lot of the time, that name is used as a derogatory term for that person. So it can also be dangerous for someone to give out their dead name. And so unfortunately, like, I don't necessarily think there are trans people who do hate it just because it has caused so much issues. It reminds them of the past, and they've worked so hard to get rid of that name. But I think part of the trans community doesn't hate that name. It's just the simple fact that people out there who don't agree with their transition or don't agree with the trans community will use their dead name and like throw it in their face and rub it in their face and like out them to everybody, and a form can be dangerous. And so all in all, a dead name is the name that you were given at birth.
Yeah. Kind of, we'll go back to that question in just a minute, but You posted a video the other day talking about how you met this female, y'all went out or chatted or whatever, and then she said something about how you weren't. What was it? What'd you say?
She said that I was the most unauthentic person because I was just a girl pretending to be a boy.
That's what it was. But then you went on to talk about. So one, I was like, show me who she is. And then you talked about how, which I found, it kind of made me at a loss for words. It just kind of took my breath away. You were talking about how it could be life altering, like dangerous to come out on a first date or a first meeting of someone and tell them this story, which I
Yeah,
never thought, but it totally could.
I have actually had trans friends who have been physically attacked for coming out as transgender in public.
Man, that is awful. And again, while we're having this live stream. Wow. That, yeah, I watched the rest of that and just found myself being like, oh my gosh, that's wild that you even have to think about that.
Yep, it's very sad.
So sad. All right, let's go back to the dead name. So, do people in your life, do any of them refuse to acknowledge your transition, or do they still refer to you as your dead name? Like,
Nobody personally that I'm actually like close with or friends with or family wise. It did take my parents a good while to get used to using Aiden and he, him. But I and it wasn't because they weren't trying, they were trying. But I think one of the hardest parts was because I wasn't around. I was living in a different state, so they didn't see the transition happening. They weren't used to using the name. They didn't really get used to using it around and whatnot. So it took them a while. There was only one person and it was a client at my work. I used to work for a vet clinic and loved her dog, and the client loved me. And so the client walked up to the front desk, and we usually had the name of like people who worked there on the board so that when people dropped their dogs off, they would know who was working. And I guess she didn't see my dead name. And so she was like, oh, like, does so-and-so work here anymore? And then my front desk person was like, well, technically, but they go by Aiden now. And the lady was like, well, I'm used to calling them so-and-so, so I'm going to keep calling them so-and-so. And the front desk person was like, no, they go by Aiden now, and that's what you need to refer them as. And she was like, well, I'm moving to Texas soon anyway, so it doesn't matter. So I'm just going to refer to them as da-da-da. Yeah. Luckily, it was the last time I ever saw her, and like she never came. Like they did move to Texas and whatnot, but that was like close, at least to my knowledge, the only person that's ever been like, absolutely not, I'm not going to call them that. But
wow, it started out a really big compliment, and then it turned out like, what the? Yeah, yep. They liked you enough to look for your name.
And then, but not enough to respect what I want to be called.
Exactly, like it's any of their business. That's kind of my thing. Like, what does it matter?
Right.
Yeah, that's unreal. So you talked about this earlier about how even your parents noticed how much happier you were. How do you feel like this has changed your mental health, or how's your mental health been impacted by like gender expression, transition, people's reactions? Like, how's all that going mental wise?
So I think the biggest thing is just, self-love. Don't get me wrong. It's not that I hated myself pre-transition. Like I was in good shape. I was a college basketball player. Like I did great in college and everything, but like I just never felt like I belonged in the body I was in. Like there were multiple times where I would like get undressed to go get in the shower, and I would just look in the mirror and would just like cry. And it's not like I think a big misconception is that a lot of people think that trans people think they're ugly as a girl, so that they're going to transition into a boy to be more attractive. And I'm just like that. No, I wasn't ugly. I didn't think I was ugly. I didn't think I had a bad body. I didn't think any of it. It just wasn't me. And so I think the number one thing is like self-confidence and self-love. Like I finally like what I see when I look in the mirror, and when I'm out in public. I think the first time I was at like a restaurant with my family. I went to go visit my sister in Alabama. We were all sitting at the dinner table, and the waitress came over and she was like, "Oh, can I get your drink?" And she was like, "Sir," and I was not used to it, and it didn't like click, and I was like, "Oh, you're talking to me." I just had like this huge smile on my face, and I was like, "Yes, I am Sir. That is me.
I am King Sir."
And so it was just the gender euphoria of like a stranger. So like it was nice when people who knew me knew that I was transitioning and like, oh, like we need to call him Sir now, like, or he, him, use those pronouns and everything, because like they were trying, and that's what they were told. But when a complete stranger who has no idea who you are comes along and calls you sir, it's just like a whole different level of like, yeah, that's me.
You're like, check.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love it. That's fantastic. What about like other people's reactions? Like, I know I cannot imagine, and you've posted about a lot of them, but like those haters that get on and are just like terrible, terrible. Do you, it's kind of hard to explain because you can't not read it. It can't not affect you, but how do you handle that healthily, mentally,
Yeah.
right? What do you do with all that?
So I'm not gonna lie. At first, when I would get a lot of hate, it got to me real bad, like all the time, especially when they would talk about my chest. And but I mean, unfortunately, I mean, a lot of it was like I would just lean on friends and family. Luckily, I had good support systems. So I'm like, hey, check out what this person said, and they were just like, hey, like they're lonely, they're miserable, like don't worry about it. Like you have 100 supporters to your one like negative person. And unfortunately now to the point where it's like I'm used to it. It's kind of like when somebody like sits there and calls me a woman, I kind of be like, is that all you got? Because you got to do better than that if you're going to beat all these other people that are hating on me. Like it's the point. And then some of the stuff that people say, like it's very hateful, but it's almost like entertaining. Like you look really dumb. I'm sorry. Like you just look dumb.
Yeah.
But I think that the biggest thing is just knowing that the only reason they're hating is because it's something uncommon to them and they don't understand. And so their fight or flight reaction is to hate on it and put it down. Or just misery loves company and they just have a terrible life and they're wanting somebody else to have a terrible life too. And they see somebody thriving and enjoying their life as the person they were meant to be. And they are not okay with that. So I'm just like, well, if that's what you want to hate on, then I must be doing something right in life.
That it should be a compliment, I guess, really, in the end.
Sort of, yeah.
Man, I hate that so it tears me up to think about that. And that's what, one reason I kind of hesitated on starting even social media. So I started playing music by myself just a couple of years ago. It took me a long time to start social media because of that. I was like, the more I put myself out, the more haters can contact and message. And then one day I just had like an aha moment of who cares? Right? I mean, and it is blown up. It's been amazing. I've met people like you. I've started my You're Not Alone project. It's been, the positivity outweighs the negativity. And it's like you said, it's almost like a compliment either way it goes.
When I first started my transition, I think my mom came up to visit for my first top surgery. And we were talking about social media and this, that, and the other. And at this point, I had already had a full beard. My voice was deep and everything. And most people couldn't clock me on the road for being transgender. And so she even told me, she was like, why don't you just delete all of your social media, start over as just Aiden? She was like, don't talk about your transition, just be Aiden. And she was like, I hate all of the hate that you get. It scares me because of like how many like trans individuals get murdered a year. And she was like, you putting yourself out there just puts like a huge target on your back, which, understanding like my mom's just trying to protect me and wants me safe, so it's completely understandable. But I told her, and I was like, but if every trans person thought that way and did that, and there's nothing wrong with being stealth, but trans visibility is so important for education and information, and you're not alone, and somebody out there feels the same way you do. I mean, without social media, I mean, I probably wouldn't have known so much about the trans community and had so many people to go to and talk to. And so I personally wanted to be that for somebody who may be questioning their gender or wanting to transition, or a mom whose son is transitioning and kind of wants to see like the process or what's going to happen and see that you can thrive and be happy and be successful in life at being transgender. And so, yes, social media is bittersweet because of all the hate and everything like that, but I definitely think it's very, very important.
Yeah, absolutely. That was kind of my thing. I mean, with I think, like I said, I think it was like 4 million on TikTok. You've got hundreds of thousands on Instagram. And that was my thought was, one, how brave, and two, how terrifying, because that's just like more people that are exposed. But I mean, you use your platform for such a good cause. Like I wouldn't have known. Like I reached out to the only human people that were on there and open, and they were so friendly about answering questions I had, and like just, and so that's how I got to know about it, really, and you're from the South, I'm from Arkansas. And so it's just something you don't see that often.
Right.
Southern, we're in the Southern Bible.
Yep.
Which you said you've been around Little Rock before, so you know how it goes.
Yep, sure do.
Absolutely. All right. So, do you feel like the transgender community is represented accurately in the media? So, they always put it on. I know, like Pride, they come up and they pick the most rainbow, like this person in a Speedo that's all rainbowed out and painted, and it's just unreal, right? Do you feel like they do that with transgender, or do you feel like it's translated pretty well?
So there's actually a documentary that touches a lot on this topic, and I think it's a really good documentary for a lot of people who want to learn about the trans community and especially the history of the trans community. It's called Disclosure, and it actually talks about how, and even coming from somebody who's trans, how the trans community has actually been put in cinema for a very, very long time. Unfortunately, all of the aspects of the trans community in media have been negative. They're serial killers, or they're the only reaction to trans women is throwing up or violence, or and then even recently in the L Word, the only showing of trans men was Max, and when he started testosterone, he became this raging a-hole that you didn't want to be a fan of, and it was just the complete opposite of what like trans men need to be portrayed as. And it's unfortunate because that was actually an LGBTQ show. So in actual media like movies and stuff like that, recently I mean, a show Pose is also a really, really good show to watch, one of my favorites, and it has it's geared towards trans women of color, but it's an amazing show, very educational, learn a lot. But when it comes to just recently, unfortunately, one of the main social media trans people was Caitlyn Jenner, and no, just a whole big no around that. And so, but I mean, love to see like Laverne Cox. She is absolutely amazing. And I think it just depends. Unfortunately, I mean, personally, the only thing that you see a lot about the trans community in the news is when we get murdered. You don't really see too much good stuff about it, or too much positive. That more so is just what you're going to see from social media influencers. Luckily, we are seeing it positively portrayed more and more in media, but I think there was one crazy part of the documentary Disclosure where there was an actress who was a trans woman and got this, I mean, like leading role, and I want to say the movie was like Sex and the City or something like that, and she had this like viewing party. She got all her friends together and they were so excited to like watch it for the first time. And her line was coming up. She entered the scene, her line was coming up, everybody got in the room, got quiet, and they lowered her voice an octave without asking her, just so that the whole, like everybody would know that she was transgender. And then they would raise it back up to continue the rest of the show, but didn't run it by her. She didn't have any idea. And everybody, it just got quiet. And it was just like so awkward because like, yeah, it was. And so it's really good documentary to watch. Like I said, it's very informative, very educational, but it also kind of makes you sit back and be like, wow, that's like really shitty, or like I can't believe like they said that in this movie, or that this happened in the movie and whatnot. Yeah, it's crazy.
Wow, that is insane. I'm gonna have to watch that. I've never heard of it. Disclosure. Is that on like Netflix or?
Yep, it's on Netflix.
Okay, I'm gonna have to put that on my to-do list for sure. Man, that's wild. Like if I were her, I'd be so ticked, right?
Yep. Yeah, she was like everybody was like cheering and everything was going on, and then her first like line came, and then like they dropped it an octave, and then she's like, it just got quiet, and everybody in the room was just like,
I cannot imagine. Oh my gosh, that is wild. So when I posted about your event, I also posted that people could ask questions. I got a ton of them. Some of them were not rated G, so we're not talking about those. I know I texted you about that, and I was like, so we're just going to pass on that. Okay, cool. Their questions are appreciated. However, Google is a great thing. You can also message Aiden directly if you'd like to know certain things, but we won't address them on here. So one thing that got brought up really commonly, which I have to agree with, how should we address pronouns correctly? So is it rude to ask someone what their pronouns are? That feels really judgmental to me. So I don't know
So
about that correctly.
one of my favorite ways to kind of just kind of see where somebody's at with pronouns, I would never, I mean, I wouldn't say never, but I probably wouldn't recommend just coming out and saying, what are your pronouns? Because then in some aspects, some people might think it as like, well, if you don't think they're just like whatever, then like you're odd. Are you like you think they're like I'm trans or something like that? Or some people could take it offensive. Um, my favorite way, and I feel like is it's a very safe way and a very good way of saying, like, if I were to introduce myself to you, I'd say, hi, my name's Aiden. I go by he, him. So then by me putting my pronouns out there, in return, most often somebody's like, okay, well, he put his pronouns out there, like that will make me feel more comfortable putting my own pronouns out there. And then more often than not, they'll say, I'm so and so, and my pronouns are A, B, C, and D. So I think that would be a good way to do it. And then it kind of just depending if it's a complete stranger, I would definitely, that would be the way I would do it. But if it's somebody that you may know personally or have met and you have hung out with for a while and you just never really caught them. I think it was a party one time and like I was telling a story or I was doing something and I used a pronoun and then I was like, oh wait. And I was like, what pronouns are you comfortable with? And then they said them and I was like, okay, I just wanted to make sure that I was respectful and then continue the story. Like I didn't make a big deal out of it. Like I didn't want to like single anybody out or anything. But I think right off the bat, complete strangers, a good way is to put yourself out there, give your pronouns so that they feel more comfortable. Like, okay, they've made it a safe space for pronouns to be said. It's not as weird for me to say it so that I can go ahead and say my pronouns as well.
Yeah. And I think that's great. That's a good way to do it. I've run into that situation a couple of times and I thought, oh, I need to ask him that too, because you don't want to be rude. You don't want to assume or, like you said, make them feel super judged or anything like that when you're trying to be respectful. So the best way to go about it, right? Cool. Very good. I think that's a great one. So in preparing for this live stream, I actually know somebody pretty well who had a daughter who transitioned into male. They moved off for college. So I reached out to her and asked, as a parent, kind of going through that process, what are some questions you have? Would you like other parents to know? All of those things. And it was really cool to chit chat with her. One, I want to say I'm proud of us because a lot of the questions we addressed already were things that she would have addressed. But one thing she also talked about would be, what would be some advice you'd give to parents of children who are transgender?
So I think the biggest thing is just be supportive. Listen to your children. What do they prefer being called? What do they feel comfortable being called? If they want to wear a certain type of clothing, let them wear that certain type of clothing. And then being an advocate for them when they're not around or when they're not able to be an advocate advocate for themselves. So speak for them when they may not be able to speak. I think it's just, especially with minors, I think a huge thing is protect trans kids. And I think a lot of that has to do with the parents of those trans children. And then it just, the biggest thing is listen, see what they need. I mean, if possibly talking to a therapist is a good idea to see kind of what the next best steps would be or how to best support them. Call them the correct name, call them the correct pronouns, and then, like I said, just standing up for them when they're not around. And if you hear somebody talking bad about the trans community or about trans children, don't kind of just not say anything or kind of go along with it, not to stand out, like stand up for your kids and kind of advocate for them.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's a good one. I've read a lot lately, especially from people like Glennon Doyle that are huge like LGBTQ advocates and things, talking about how silence is actually giving in. It's saying that you agree with it. And so how important it is to talk out and to speak your mind. So if you're in a room, people are talking about transgender negatively, most people would think, well, just don't get involved. But they're finding now that you should go out and you should say something, right?
Right.
Stand up for what you believe in rather than staying quiet.
Right.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So what advice would you give to people wanting to transition?
My biggest advice is if you know it's what you need and it's going to be for your happiness, do it. Don't ask somebody else's permission. Don't ask for anybody else's opinion. The transition journey is going to be one of the most selfish journeys that you will take, but in the best way possible. It is 100% about you. It's exactly what you need in your life, and you're doing it for you and not for anybody else. And I think people who are around individuals who are transitioning need to, and I think that's a big thing that a lot of people aren't okay with, is you have to realize that someone's transition, it's not about you, it's about them, and they're making it about their happiness and what they need in life. And transitioning is literally a lifesaver for a lot of people. And then when you start your transition, probably one of the biggest kind of like things of advice that I give is do not compare your transition to anybody else's transition. I unfortunately did that, and it made it not terrible, but it was like, well, this person had facial hair by this month, and I'm on this month and I don't have facial hair. This person's voice was this deep by this month and mine's not this deep. And if you're constantly comparing your chapter 1 to somebody else's chapter 10, or even your chapter 1 to somebody else's chapter 1, everybody's book is written completely differently. And if you're going to sit there and compare transitions and where everybody's changes happen differently, if they even happen at all. And so it's just sit back and enjoy the ride, because it's an amazing journey. It's very tough, but it's very much worth it.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. Yeah, I can't imagine how tough it is mentally, physically, emotionally, all the things. I feel like it tests all those areas.
Yes, very much.
All right. So also for people that don't know, when you decide, okay, I have the funds or whatever, I'm going to make this transition. This is what I want to do. I'm able to do it. This is something you have to do every day for the rest of your life, right? The T-shot.
No, so it's only once a week.
Okay, once a week.
Well, depending. So there's actually different kinds of testosterone.
Okay.
There is a gel that you can put on, and I'm pretty sure the gel is every day. You have to rub it on your arm. You have to leave it on there for like 30 minutes. You can't touch anything. And then I think you have to like switch arms every day for that. I do the injections, and there are 2 types of injections. There's an IM injection, which is intramuscular, which means you have to go all the way into the muscle. And there's a sub-Q injection, which is just kind of just like in a layer of fat. I do the IM injections once a week. So I'm on 0.5 ml every Tuesday. I do an injection.
Very good. So how long did it take you to start? Because I've watched your video, and it's like 1 month on testosterone, 3 months on, and it is unreal. Like, it blows my mind that the body can do that. It's a miraculous thing to me. It blows me away. I am super intrigued by that. So for you, how long did it take you? So you start these shots, you're super excited. How long did it take to actually for you to notice these changes? Or was it making those videos that kind of help you notice?
I was about to say the videos definitely helped, because anytime I felt like not many changes have happened or not much has changed since the last video, whatever, I'll go back and I'll make a video, or I'll watch the last video. I'm like, okay, like this has changed, this has changed, this has changed. But personally, like without talking about the videos, I probably wouldn't say like huge, I didn't notice like huge changes probably until about 4 or 5 months on testosterone. It's kind of like when a big voice drop happened. A good bit of like facial hair had already started coming in. Like my fat redistribution had already started happening. Facial like restructure had already started happening. So I'd probably say between like big changes where I, like if I wouldn't have made the videos, would have noticed, probably around like 4 to 6, 7 months is when I was like, whoa, like, okay, I can feel the deep voice. I can feel like the facial hair and everything coming in. So I'd probably say around there.
That just blows my mind, right? That a shot can do that. That's wild. Technology has come so far. Medicine has come so far. Really cool. So I know they make speech therapy for transgender to try to teach them like more feminine ways or more masculine ways, how to do your voice healthily without straining it too much. Did you ever go through anything like that?
So I did not. I thought about it because, but then I kind of figured a deep voice really wasn't in my nature, because my dad's voice isn't very deep. My brother's voice isn't very deep. Like me and my brother almost sound identical. Like if we ever talk on the phone, or if we like play Call of Duty with the headsets, anytime I hear him talk, I feel like I'm like talking to myself. And so I kind of knew. So, and I also could be wrong about this, but I think testosterone does a lot more for trans men when it comes to dropping of the voice. I don't think estrogen does as much for trans women. So I think they have to work a little bit harder on their voice. So I think that's more something geared for them, like the teaching of the higher voice and everything like that. And I think for trans men, testosterone like does a good bit of it. So I don't know as many trans men that do like the vocalization classes as I do trans women.
Gotcha. Very good. Do you fit, you mentioned earlier talking about your friends that watched you go through this transition. Do you feel like testosterone shots, do you feel like it changed you personality wise, emotion wise? Like, did you feel differently as you did before?
When I first started testosterone, I think it wasn't just the testosterone. I think it was just my body getting used to the hormones in my system. And so I was very much on, just very amped up and like on edge all of the time. Like I was, and so I think that was just my body like, whoa, like what is this? And trying to figure out what to do with it and whatnot. And so at first it was very much like on, just like very amped up and just very like high tense all the time. I wouldn't say like mad or anything because I didn't get mad easier. I was just like very just like high strung. And then once the testosterone kind of like leveled out, then that was that. Emotionally wise, um, I don't think I've cried since I started testosterone. And so, and like I've tried. Like there were days where I'm just like, I could really use a good cry right now. I've tried, and I just physically cannot cry.
Trying to squeeze it out.
Yeah, and I'm just like, this is crap. Like it really makes me mad. Um, and I think a lot of things like pre-T when I would get stressed out or overwhelmed, something like that, I would have like a breakdown or I'd cry or anything like that. Um, but now it's more of like if I have a lot going on, it doesn't bother me as much, or stuff that used to frustrate me doesn't frustrate me, kind of like rolls off my shoulder a little bit more now. And then mentality wise, I think yeah, I've changed personality wise, but only for the better because I'm more confident in myself and I like who I see in the mirror and I'm more confident around other people and everything like that. Um, and so I think that is a big change, but like for the better.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So let's transition into the questions people sent in for me. So I said this earlier, there were a ton of not rated G questions. We're going to skip over those, although appreciated. We're not going to talk about those, but let's stay on your mental health. So I know body dysphoria is a real thing. I actually did a live stream with somebody that struggled with that and continues to. It's kind of an everyday battle. Do you feel like you would use that terminology for you when you were female, like some type of body dysphoria or just,
Oh, 100%.
yeah,
Body dysphoria, I think, was a big reason, like I said, when I would get undressed to go into the shower and I'd look in the mirror and I would just absolutely hate what I saw. It was a huge body dysphoria thing. Um, for me personally, I definitely had more top dysphoria than I had bottom. Um, and it's unfortunately, not unfortunately, but it is something that a lot of therapists and doctors actually need you to be diagnosed with before you can get put on hormone therapy or before you can get top surgery or bottom surgery or kind of anything medically from doctors. And I think it also, for if you were to have insurance, they actually, I think, you have to be diagnosed with body dysphoria to get top surgery through your insurance for it to be considered instead of like a boob job where it's just I can't think of the word now.
like medically necessary, maybe?
Yeah, so it is. So it's something that is actually medically necessary and not just cosmetic. That's what I was thinking
Wow.
of.
Wow.
Because a lot of people complain like I hate that like I have to get all these therapy letters for it to go through insurance and that and the other. That's the biggest thing is that they have to have a difference between it being seen as a cosmetic thing and like a medically necessary thing. And so for you to get those things done, you actually have to be diagnosed with body dysphoria
Gotcha.
or body dysphoria.
Sure. Well, that kind of makes sense. I feel like there are always people that are going to try and jip the system to get a boob job. So I could totally see people coming in being like, well, I don't,
Right.
as much as I hate that there's such a process to do so, there's kind of a fine line between people always trying to jip the system.
Yeah.
So going off of that, someone also asked, which can go on that, when you were going through such body dysphoria and unhappiness and before you made this transition, did you go to therapy? Did you address it? How did you get that diagnosis?
So I personally did not. It kind of depends on you personally what you think you need. and then your doctor. So I went through Planned Parenthood to actually get started on hormone replacement therapy. A lot of people don't know that Planned Parenthood does something like that, but they actually, some of them do, not all of them. And Planned Parenthood is one of those places where they believe you don't need a therapy letter to tell you what you need for your body. And so I knew that this is what I needed. I knew this is what was going to be the next steps in my life. And so I personally did not feel like I needed to see a therapist to tell me, yeah, you know what you need. Okay, here you go. And so for me personally, no, I did not. I went to the doctor's office, had a doctor's appointment. They did blood work that day. It was fine. They showed me how to get my shot, and they gave me my prescription for testosterone that day.
Wow.
So it was very, very quick turnaround for me. On the other end, there are people, like one of my really good friends who's pretty well known on TikTok, Eli. He did see a therapist and wanted to see a therapist and was very glad he saw a therapist before he started testosterone. And I think his doctor made him have a therapist letter before starting testosterone. I did have to get a therapist letter for my top surgery, but for insurance reasons mostly. And the cool thing was the therapist that I talked to was actually transgender himself. And so then once we kind of started the first session, he was like, look, I get it. I know you know what you need, and you just literally just need this piece of paper to tell insurance that you need it. Like, and so it was a lot of, I mean, we did talk about like top surgery and what it meant and made sure I was mentally ready and everything like that. And then he's usually like, usually I do 2 full sessions, but he was like, you just need like a session and a half. And so the second session or the half session, he's like, hey, just go into this mentally. How you feeling? What's going on up there? Like, are you sure you're ready for this and everything? And then after that, he's like, all right, here's your letter. And so that, for me, that was the most therapy that I had gotten. And then kind of personal, but I was supposed to actually get a hysterectomy done recently, but I had a bunch of medical issues, so I wasn't able to. But unfortunately, by the medical field, for trans men to get a hysterectomy, it's seen as a phase of bottom surgery, and you actually have to have 2 letters from 2 different therapists saying that you are ready to get even just a hysterectomy, much less any more steps in that direction.
Wow. Interesting. Holy cow. Okay. This is how uneducated I am. I didn't even think about a hysterectomy. Like, duh.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really unfortunate that you have to go through all those steps. You would think, like that's huge reproductive, like, let's get rid of that. And wow, that's crazy. Okay. Very good. So somebody asked another question. I thought this was kind of funny. I wanted to ask you, how do you handle fatigue and keep your patience with explaining yourself over and over? And they said to ignorant people.
So I actually get asked this question a lot on my live because I'll go on TikTok live a good bit and I'll have people ask all the questions like, don't you get tired of answering the same questions over and over again? And so I kind of have the same answer every time. Can I like bring out some statistics? The trans community is less than 0.5% of the human race. Known that is out. And that more than 80% of people don't know somebody who's transgender. And so when doing lives or talking to people and anything like that, more often than not, I am probably going to be the only first and probably the only trans experience that a lot of people have. And so unfortunately, that less than 0.5% community relies on my shoulders to that one person, or those however many people that are in my life who will have never met somebody at least they don't know of that is trans, and will probably never talk to somebody who's trans again. And so if I kind of bring in this, excuse my French, half-ass, I don't feel like talking or explaining myself or personality, and or blow up on somebody or cuss somebody out because they may have asked an insensitive question or something like that, their whole outlook on the trans community is that one interaction that we just had. And so now they hate the whole trans community because of that one interaction they had. If somebody's like, oh yeah, something trans community. Oh yeah, I was on live with this one trans guy and he was a complete a-hole. Like, I'm never going to talk to a trans person again. And so for me personally, with keeping that in my head, I try to keep my cool as much as I can, even with the most ignorant people that come in and just say the most. And I know there are people, there's a difference between somebody asking a like very insensitive, like offensive question and not knowing it, just trying to be educated. And there's between somebody doing that and just being ignorant, just to be a butthead. And so I tried to tell the person who's actually trying to be educated, like, look, what you said was offensive. This is why it was offensive. I'll still probably answer your question, but like next time, try to ask it this way or something like that. And then to the ignorant person, I'll probably just say some kind of like joke and then just continue on and just ignore them or block them or whatever. But I try to keep in my head that like you said, I have 3 million followers on TikTok. More often than not, the same 100, 200 people are not going to be the same in my live that I was on Tuesday than was on Thursday. And I think it's very important that I do constantly be okay with educating, because like I said, that one person that I answered the question 10 minutes ago wasn't in my live 10 minutes ago, and they may be asking the same question, but they need the same answer. And so if I ever feel like I'm getting to that point where I'm drained or I'm just not like ready for society at the moment or anything like that, there's sometimes where I just won't go live, or I will just delete the social media apps for a little bit. And I actually have all of my social media notifications turned off, just because it just gives me a break. And I can, if I want to check the notifications, I can go into the app and check them. But if not, I'm not constantly getting them on my phone. And so sometimes I just won't look at the apps for a few days or something like that, or I'll go a few days without going live or anything. If I just feel like I won't be able to give my 100% to people.
That's a fantastic way to look at it. Yeah, I get burned out on my social. It's just emails all the time. Like, so I do music as well with the You're Not Alone. So it's emails all the time, booking, planning these live streams, it's nonstop looking at my phone. And people don't understand how much work that is. So I can't imagine 3-4 million followers, all that my brain might quite literally explode. So I don't know how you do that. It also, props to you for that outlook. That is fantastic. And that is an amazing way to look at it. Like, that's such a good way to look at it. Like, just, this person doesn't know, let me educate them. Because I would probably lose my patience a little earlier than you would. Okay. So let's address, somebody asked a question referring to the cis community. So let's start out with one, what is cis? So it'd be CIS.
So the cis community, a lot of people say it's like the opposite of the trans community. The cis community is someone who identifies with the gender that they were assigned at birth. So like my mother was assigned female at birth and she identifies herself as a female. So then she would be considered a cis female. And my father is assigned male at birth and considers himself a male. And I think a lot of confusion is and a lot of people say, well, why don't you just say male? Well, and I hate the term normal male. I hate that term, because in saying those terms, then you are practically saying that trans is not normal, which is not the case. Me and my father are both male. We just have an adjective in front of that, trans or cis, which is describe which kind of male we are. I don't like the term when responding when a lot of people say, well, look, I'm not a cis woman, I'm just a woman. Well, technically, yes, you are a woman. So are trans women. Trans women are also just women. But when we have to describe what kind of woman we are, one is cis and one is trans.
Gotcha. So they said, what is the biggest misconception that you deal with from the cis community?
There's a few of them, depending.
That's kind of a loaded question, I feel like.
So one of the biggest misconceptions when it comes to the cis straight women's community is that when they date a trans guy, that they're not straight anymore. I can't tell you how many videos I've made of me like doing a dance or whatever, or just talking about being transgender or whatever, and then like a cis straight woman will comment and say like, oh, I'm not straight anymore, or you make me question my sexuality. No, you're still straight because I'm still a guy. I think that's a really big misconception, and a lot of them don't understand why that it's like disrespectful or offensive. And so then I have to say, like, with you saying that you're not straight anymore, you're implying that you would be having an attraction to something other than a man, and you'd be invalidating me that I'm a man, and that's not the case. Most of the time when I say that, they're like, oh no, I completely get it, that you're right, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend. Some people get upset and try to argue, but I just ignore them. And then I think another misconception is that when there is somebody who is trans that's out in social media or visible or educating, that we don't want your kids to be trans, but we want your trans kids to be safe. And I think a lot of misconceptions that we're out here trying to make kids change their mind about being cis and make them want to be trans and this and that. And that's not the case. That is not, nobody wants to be trans. Nobody wants to be hated by society. Nobody wants to be exiled or hate speeched or murdered or anything like that because of who they are. We don't want to turn your kids trans. We don't want to you can't turn people trans. Trans is how you're born. We just want trans kids and trans individuals to be safe. And that's why we educate and we put ourselves out there so much and are so visible. And I think that is a big misconception with a lot of the cis communities, that they think that we have this like alter reason why we're like out and proud about being trans. And I'm just like, no, like I don't really care if your child's cis or trans. Like I just want them to be safe. Like I don't want them to be like, I'm not recruiting them to my community or anything like that.
Here's my card.
Yeah, right. Like I think that's a big thing.
Yeah, I truly think some extremely uneducated, we'll use that word, think LGBTQ, anything in that community, I swear they think you can catch it. You know, like if we're around it too much, if they touch me too much, I might come down with it. I might be gender. And you're just like, oh, it hurts me to hear people discuss things that way.
Yeah.
So wrong. I love what you said. So say that one more time because I want to remember that. So you don't want kids to be transgender.
I don't want your kids to be trans. I want your trans kids to be safe.
Ooh, that gives me goosebumps. That's good. Oh man, that's really good. I love that. I want to remember that. We got a lot of questions about people asking if you'd gone to a counselor, if you'd seen mental health experts. Somebody asked how your mental health has changed. So let's compare it. Let's break it down. Let's change it from when you were female at 20 years old, and then when you were male, let's say now 27. So your mental health, how do you feel like this transition has helped, or has it changed? How would you explain?
I definitely think a big thing was because I wasn't very confident in myself physically or anything like that pre-T. I think a lot more got to me personally because I wasn't confident in myself. And so if somebody were to try to like break me down or like say bad things to me or disrespect me, something like that, I think part of me would be like, would give into it a lot easier than I do now, because some of it may have been true. Like you're right, like I don't respect myself or I don't feel good about myself or anything like that. But now I don't, that's not the case at all. My mental mentality about myself has gotten a lot stronger. I'm way more confident in myself. So if somebody says something hateful, more often than not, it's like that's a reflection of you hating on me, and I don't think I let people get to me as much. And just in self happiness, like I'm okay with where I am. I'm okay with what I see when I look in the mirror. I'm okay with what I hear when I listen to my voice on some kind of recording, or I see myself in a video or anything like that. Like I like what I see. And I'm able to give a better me now that I love myself more. Whether that's in relationships, with family, with friends, with just anything in general, really. And I think that's a very one of my favorite things mentally and emotionally about my transition is just the like road to self discovery and self love, and everything is a huge part of my journey.
Yeah, absolutely. You can almost, you were talking about people were saying, oh, you thought you were ugly before. Looking at your pictures and your videos when you were a female, you can see, not that I knew you personally when I watch these, but you can see the transition. Like you look happier and you seem so much more self-confident and just, like, this is me,
Right.
It's like the female videos, they were good and you didn't look unhappy, but it was more reserved maybe. I don't know. There's just something about it. It's apparent that you're you're happier.
Yeah.
I love it. So somebody asked, which I debated asking you this question, but we'll go ahead and ask it anyway. Somebody asked, what if you change your mind? So you get all these T-shots or you get estrogen, you get years through the process and you're like, I've made a mistake. What happens then?
So they're actually, it's called detransitioning. And I was actually talking with Eli about this, and I think he brought up the numbers, and I think he said that only of the 0.5% of individuals who are trans, I think also less than 0.5% or something even smaller than like that detransition. And I think there's so much that I don't think people think it's a mistake. A lot of the times when somebody transitions and they go to detransition, it's not so much like, oh, like this wasn't for me. It's like, okay, if they were female to male, like I wasn't a female, but like I really don't consider myself a male either, then they'll detransition into like the non-binary or go by they them pronouns and whatnot. And here's my thing is, I think a lot of the trans community looks down on those people because they think that those people make the trans community look bad. And I don't think that's the case. Those people are completely valid. Sometimes it takes a process to figure out who you are. And if that process is starting your transition and realizing this transition is not for you and then stopping it, so be it. You are 100% valid in how you feel and the process that you take to figure out who you are. And so I don't necessarily think that those people who do transition make the trans community look bad in the fact that see that person transition and now like they don't want anymore. Now the whole trans community feels that way. No, that's not the case. And so I definitely do think that detransitioning is 100% valid. And like I said, it just takes a few people, a few more steps in the process to figure out who they are. And sometimes one of those steps is detransitioning.
Yeah. For me, I can barely decide what I want to eat for breakfast in the morning. So to decide that I want to change my entire gender and I want to transition, I'm not sure I could ever make that decision. I'd be like, yeah, no, yeah, eh. I would be so terrified. I'm an Enneagram 6, so everything has to be planned out like to the T, and that's not planned out. So I don't think I can make that jump. So props to you for being able to do that. That's a huge choice that I can't imagine how much thought and everything went into it. So that's fantastic. All right, we got one more question. Knowing what you know now, being through what you've been through, the top surgeries, all of those things you've posted. I think you're on your 5th top surgery, right? It's all of those things, the social media, the feedback, positive and negative. Knowing what you know now, would you go back and do it again?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. Oh, yeah. Because I mean, it is very much so a life-saving thing. I could not imagine myself, like my life, if I wouldn't transitioned. I couldn't imagine. Honestly, I don't know if I could imagine myself making it this far if I wouldn't have started my transition. And so, yes, 100% would go back and do it again and again and again.
Are you about to cry? Are we about to?
No, I wish.
I thought I helped you with that process.
I wish. Nope, it's not gonna happen.
I thought I had you.
Close, but no.
Close. I love it. Aiden, it has been fantastic. I could talk to you all night, I think. Like you're so
well, actually there was one thing that I wanna talk about real quick. I think it's like really cool, coolish. And there's actually a few things. The one thing that in the I wanna say in the Polynesian, they actually see trans individuals kind of not, I don't use the term royalty, but kind of like higher ups because they have lived in the female and the male body and aspects of the world and things like that. And so they have kind of those things. So I always thought that was like a really cool fact. And being trans and kind of seeing how society treats females compared to how society treats males has just been absolutely mind-blowing, but like mind-opening. Some of the things that I've done the exact same thing as a female, and like the reactions I got from society was just like negative, bad, this, that, and the other, and I would do it as a male, and it was like good and all this, and I'm just like, it's in one specific example was when I was working for my vet clinic. I was a shift lead, so it was like an assistant manager, and one of the people that worked for me was a woman, and she was explaining something to a guy up front, and he was just getting super aggressive and just super mean. And she's like, "Look, I'm sorry, we can't do this because A, B, C, and D, like," and gave out the protocols and whatever. And so of course, and he was like, "Well, I want to talk to your manager, da 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 da." So she comes back and she was like, "Hey, he wants to talk to a manager. Like, you're kind of like the closest thing. Can you go up and like talk to him?" So I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I walked up there. And I was like, well, I asked her, and I was like, well, what does he want? And then she was like, well, he wants this. And I was like, well, we can't do that. And she was like, I know. I said we can't do it because A, B, C, and D. So I said, okay. So I walked up there, and he asked us for the same thing. And I said, well, we can't do that because A, B, C, and D. And he was like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Uh,
Yeah. And I was like, wow, you are a POS.
yeah. Oh, you can't imagine the feedback I get as a female as well. Somebody told me the other day, I do speech therapy as well, like part-time in the mornings with adults. And somebody told me that they didn't know why I was at work, that I should be at home. And the only clock I should see is on the oven.
Wow.
Yes. What?
Yeah.
You just nod your head and you're like flipping them off in your mind.
Yep.
You just try to be patient. Unreal people have that outlook. I love the Polynesian saying that I was going to say transgender. I feel like, to me, especially after talking to you, I feel like I look up to that community because I couldn't make that decision. That's such a huge, brave, bold decision. You know that you may get tons of negative feedback. And like I said, it's totally selfish, but in the best possible way. Like, you're choosing yourself and your love over what people might think or the feedback. Like, how brave is that? Some people can't even wear a certain shirt because people make fun of them, right? So I agree with that. I feel like y'all have lived and are much, much braver than the majority of the people around.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. With 1,000% I can say that. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. Like I was
you as well.
I am stoked that our schedules finally worked out. We had a little bit of trouble kind of getting together. What time is it there in Florida?
It is 9 p.m.
Okay, so it's 8 o'clock here. So we had a little trouble kind of finding time that would work for both of us. Thank you so much to everybody that tuned in. We had a ton of people. If you'll go back, I wasn't able to keep up with all the comments, but basically everyone wants to date you, man and female. So you're probably going to have a lot of DMs coming in after this. That's in summary what all the comments said. So
Love it.
Pleasure. We'll have to stay in touch.
Yeah,
it's
we will.
been great getting to know you.
You too.
All right. I wish you the best. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this conversation and are interested in becoming a sponsor, feel free to shoot me an email at townsendtmusic@hotmail.com or shoot me a message on any social media platform at Townsendtmusic for more information. I would love for you to become a member to help spread awareness that you're not alone. If you're looking to buy or sell, I have the perfect realty company for you. Clark & Co. Realty is located in the Benton, Bryant, Arkansas area. And they understand that buying or selling a home is more than just a transaction. It's a life-changing experience. That's why their team of highly seasoned real estate professionals is dedicated to providing exceptional, personalized services for all their clients. They truly take great pride in the relationships they build, and they always work relentlessly on the client's behalf to help them achieve their perfect real estate goals. They always have the client in mind, and I can speak firsthand when I say how reliable, trustworthy, and quick they were. When I was looking to buy my first home, they were there with me every step of the way, answering every question I could think of. They showed me a great amount of knowledge and patience through the process. It's no wonder they've won so many awards for their outstanding services and their excellent relationships with clients. So if you're looking to buy or sell, there is no better option than Clark & Co. Realty. If you're looking for the perfect place to relax and unwind after a long day at work, you want to grab a cold drink with a good friend, a good community, Lucky Lou's is for you. It's located in Little Rock, Arkansas. It was founded by two friends sharing the same dream. They wanted to make a place where everyone would feel comfortable and accepted, dogs included. They wanted people to feel a little bit like they were back home. So grab a friend, grab a dog or 12 and head over to Lucky Lou's, where you can make your own luck.